What is going on, everybody? AHS Rules back again with another video. And we are here for a continuation of a series I have been doing for months now, and we are slowly winding it down. My NBA offseason wish list, and this time it is Volume 6, and is solely dedicated to the Boston Celtics. Now, if you've been keeping up with this series, I've noted several times that the series title has changed because it started off as things I want to see in the 2023 NBA offseason, and then I shortened it down and titled it Offseason Wish List because, like I said, it's short and sweet. And I will be a little bit honest with you. I kind of wish I would be talking about the Miami Heat right now because I think that's a more interesting conversation than the one I'll be talking about today. So, spoiler alert, I titled this video, I don't know what the title of this video is going to be yet. I'm leaning towards two things. Boston Celtics could have made history, but they didn't. Or the more controversial one, and the one that probably anybody else that's talking about this team is going to say, have the Celtics peaked with Jayson, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown? And the spoiler alert is no. But it still is going to be an interesting conversation because you got to question what the hell they do. That being said, though, congratulations to the Miami Heat. I will have an interesting conversation about them, but that will be down the line, and I'll talk a lot more about them this Thursday on the next edition of Shooting the Breeze. But today is talking about the Boston Celtics. Now, they're down 0-3. Game 3 in Miami, they looked dead. They just looked like they didn't want to be there, and they were just willing to wrap it up and go out without a fight. Game 4 happened. They finally started making their shots that had not been going down the first two games, mainly in that Game 3 where they were just standing there and nothing. Game 5, I'll be honest with you, I don't really remember because all my memory is towards Game 6 and the final closing seconds in which the Celtics couldn't score. The Heat were finally getting their shots in. Jimmy Butler gets fouled for three with 3 seconds left, and the Celtics still end up on top. And at that moment, I think a lot of people anticipated the mood had changed and that they were going to go to the finals. But guess what? They reverted back to Game 1, 2, and mainly 3 Celtics in this Game 7. And I'm not going to say it was a waste of time. It definitely made for some interesting conversations and things to happen in a very, I'm not going to say good series. I'll say interesting series. But if this was storytelling, this was TV drama, it had a flat finish because this is not what we expected or wanted to happen. I think a lot of people were rooting for the Celtics. Again, like I said, to me, it didn't really matter. I kind of wish I was talking about the Heat because it would have been a more interesting conversation, but that is one that we'll have down the line. But now we get on to their team. Now, going into this season, I said the Celtics had the best team. I'm not on record for that, so I should have backed that statement up. I thought the Celtics had the best team. They were just in the NBA Finals. They were extremely gassed because the series prior to the Finals, they were in a Game 7. In the second round, they were also in a Game 7, which, spoiler alert, happens again the next year. But going back to last year, they made it to get 2 Game 7s. I was saying they need a proper point guard. Marcus Smart, while he's playing point guard, and while last year he did point out the 1 year they didn't have a proper point guard, like Kemba or Kyrie, was the time they made it the furthest. It was just still, at the end of the day, you probably need that guy that can connect the dots when need be. And they got that. A great backup point guard, a great point guard that lined up with everything I said. They essentially got him for free in Malcolm Brogdon. He did so well for them. He got 6th Man of the Year. Now, I don't like talking about injuries in sports because some people look at it as an excuse. Some people, you never really know the severity of it. But I think Malcolm Brogdon was seriously hurt in these conference finals. He was under the rim sometimes, right there. It still couldn't make it. And you could just tell that his arm was bothering him. So a fully healthy Malcolm Brogdon might have been a difference in this series. But sadly, we'll never know. But going back to what I said, going into the season, I thought they had the best team because they improved. They just made it to the finals, and the one thing I wanted them to improve with, they did. Now, sadly, again, another injury happened. They never got to use Danilo Gallinari, even though we saw him on the sidelines all year. We never got to see him. Blake Griffin had his moments during the season, but when it mattered most, he wasn't really playing. But this team, I essentially think we'll see the same team next year, and if they fail, it's probably the end. So, I probably should have saved that for the end, but that's why I'm kind of like not really wanting to talk about the Celtics, because like this is a good team. They have consistently been a good team since Jayson Tatum's first. Look, I don't remember the 2016 season, but I'm pretty sure that was the year they were in the conference finals and Isaiah Thomas got hurt. But the year after was obviously the year with the first year with Kyrie. They made it to the conference finals then. 2018 was the second year at Kyrie. Bit of a weird year. Also, if you were to go back and look at that roster on paper, that would be a dominant team. But then that team changed because they lost Kyrie, they lost Terry Rozier, they added Kemba Walker, who I think a lot of Celtics fans look bad or down on the Kemba Walker years, but his first year there, he's an all-star starter. That definitely is forgotten. But going back to it, that next year, they made it back to the conference finals in the bubble, lost to the Miami Heat. The next year after, Jaylen Brown got hurt prior to the playoffs. It was just pretty much and Kemba, that's when, sadly, like injuries really screwed him up. It was just the Jayson Tatum show in the playoffs, and he got one win over the Nets, which those are the big three Nets. The one time the big three Nets were healthy, he got one win off them, so that's something to look at proudly. Then the year after, they made it to the finals when that beginning of that year was pretty rocky, and then they had a change. Like I said, they made it to the finals, but they were pretty much gassed in the finals because they had just came off 2 Game 7s. If you were to look each year, either they got screwed by injuries or they had hard-fought battles in Game 7s that might not have been necessary. Because when you look at how they beat the Heat, the Bucks last year, and again, I keep having to bring up injuries, but Middleton got injured. You probably should have beat them a lot earlier if you were basing the series solely off of Game 7. The Heat, that went right to the wire. I try to combine both words at the same time. And now, this year, the 76ers. Again, if you're basing that series solely off of Game 7, it should have been a sweep. But it wasn't the case. It was a back-and-forth series until Game 7, which I'm still a little bit upset. I was just like, why the hell did the 76ers do this? But, again, this isn't a 76ers video. Now, you compare them to the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat essentially have the same team that they had last year, minus P.J. Tucker. And P.J. Tucker was replaced by future Finals MVP Caleb Martin, and he was very important for him. That team is just very weird. And now, I bring this video up a lot because I talked a lot in it, but my Portland Trailblazers video where I was talking about the future we brought for that team without Damian Lillard, I had one statement that is very important, and it kind of connects with a couple of teams. But in that video, I was talking about the Blazers, the year they made the conference finals. They beat the Denver Nuggets in the second round, but that was the Nuggets' first year in the playoffs. Then 2 years later, in the first round, they loaded their team up, and they were going against the Nuggets without Jamal Murray. So, if you go back the 2 years prior, they were down Yusuf Nurkic. Now, if you want to say if he's a big deal or not, back then, he was. They went into that series and won that series. Undermanned. 2 years later happened. You go get essentially the same team, undermanned, and again, you're loaded, and you lost. You probably have peaked, and in the Blazers' standpoint, they have. And we keep harping on them to change that team up. They tried. It looks very weird. They're probably going to try again this offseason, and it is going to still look very weird and probably not work out. And I'm comparing that to the Boston Celtics. Now, they went against the Heat in the bubble. That series doesn't really matter because that Heat, let's look. Not many players that played in the bubble because like Goran Dragic still is not there. Jay Crowder isn't there. Essentially, Jimmy, Bam, Duncan Robinson, and if you want to include Tyler Hero. We're at the Celtics. Smart, Brown, Tatum, and Tom Lord are the only main guys that are still on the team. And Kemba's not there anymore. So I think we should mainly keep it based off last year and this year. And like I said, the Heat, kind of our worst team this year. Now, Kevin, I will admit, I did forget about Kevin Love, but I did not see much of him tonight during Game 7. So, and if he even played, because Kevin Martin was explosive and doing it up. But it's just kind of like, it's very similar to the Celtics or the Blazers, where you were able to beat this team. And now, when they're undermanned, you weren't. So, when they're there fully and when they're not there fully, you've struggled to beat them. And even last year, like I said, if you were just basing the series off of Game 7, it was right to the very end and a very questionable Jimmy Butler 3 that I feel will be forgotten now because their team is back in the NBA Finals. So essentially, I'm talking a lot about the Miami Heat, but with the Celtics, you just got to keep asking, are you better than these teams in these? Now, the Eastern Conference is definitely, this is an important offseason for a lot of teams. The Bucks and the 76ers mainly because they got to worry about keeping their guys happy. And like their main guys, Giannis and Embiid. Where at the Celtics, they need to keep their main two guys happy in Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And I think as long as Jaylen Brown's there, Tatum's going to be somewhat happy because he at least has a consistent running mate. Where with Embiid, he struggled with Simmons and Harden, and you can question the team. The Bucks, he hasn't had Middleton fully, and even this year, he wasn't there fully. So there's definitely some question marks there. But when it comes to the Celtics, you got to keep your main two guys happy, and the main source of that is going to be money because they're super max eligible. I think the Celtics are going to be more than likely to pay them because I think hypothetically, if you have both those guys on your roster, you're going to be a playoff team at least. And you're going to have a chance in the playoffs each year. Now, I'm not going to go through every Eastern Conference team, but there is one thing that I will go through. And it's something that I said in a video. What video? I don't remember. But I think there's definitely going to be people saying they should trade Jaylen Brown. And I don't think they should. I think the only reason or way that Jaylen Brown would be traded is if he says, I'm not signing that extension. I am ready to move on. Which, is he going to say that? I think that it's very 50-50. Because I think look, this is me thinking as him. He hasn't said this. It's just a sentiment that a lot of players have. Some players have. Can I be the number one option? Can I be the main guy on a team? Because as long as Jayson Tatum is here in Boston, Jayson Tatum's most likely going to be the number one guy. It would take a lot for him not to be. Now, you can question, should he be the number one guy after the finals last year and the up and down playoffs this year? It's a conversation that, again, I just said, I think Tatum's always going to be the number one guy here in Boston. So, Jaylen Brown, does he think in his mind, can I be the number one guy? And I want to be the number one guy. That thought is probably went through his mind. Is it a consistent thought? Probably not. So I've went through all 30 teams. And I said, can Jaylen Brown be the number one guy on those teams? Now, I don't have all 30 teams in front of me. I wrote down the 10 that I said maybe, but there's definite question marks to it. So, for example, the Chicago Bulls. If he was to end up on the Chicago Bulls, hypothetically, going back, because I'm doing these via trade. I'm not doing a signing next year because that would be a signing next year. We're talking about this offseason. We're not talking about next offseason. So, for example, if he was traded to the Chicago Bulls, coming back to Boston would be DeMar DeRozan or more than likely Zach LaVine. And I think the Chicago Bulls wouldn't make that trade if they didn't want Jaylen Brown to be their main guy there. So, depending, again, on the Bulls, he probably could be. There's one, I'm going to say this team for last. The Utah Jazz. I think I don't want to say they're no man's land. I think something that I think about with the Utah Jazz is they are any man's land. They're a very good team. They kind of are always, no matter who is on their roster, a very good team. They had a better year than a lot of people expected. But I don't think Lauri Markkanen is like stamped, approved, going to be the number one option as long as he is there. And if hypothetically Jaylen Brown was to end up there, again, I'd imagine Lauri Markkanen would be going to Boston. Jaylen Brown would obviously be the number one man there, but I don't think he's going to end up in Utah. The New York Knicks are probably the most prominent team that he can go to and be the number one guy. Because when I was talking about the Knicks in their offseason wish list video, I was saying you need to get a star to pair with Brunson and or Randall or Barrett. Because as long as RJ and Randall are there, I don't think they're going to be a serious contending team. There's going to always be a playoff team. And Jaylen Brown would be that main guy, missing piece for them, the main star that they'd be looking for. And why did I say Jayson Tatum? Jaylen Brown and Jalen Brunson, I think, would be a nice contending duo. Most likely. I think so. The Orlando Magic. I've harped on them needing a shooting guard because point guard, they're okay with Fultz and Cole Anthony. Jalen Suggs, you can play at point guard, but he's mostly been playing shooting guard. It's just been questionable. Small forward, power forward, center, with Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Wendell Carter Jr., those three positions are very good. Shooting guard is your weak position, is your questionable position. And as this team is right now, Jaylen Brown would be the number one guy there. Now, down the line, you could debate between him and Paolo, even him and Franz. But then again, that's a good conversation to have down the line. And they got some tradable contracts, and they got 2 first-round picks this year. Something could work, most likely wouldn't via a trade. The Brooklyn Nets. Now, if him and Mikal Bridges are there, I'd imagine it's a debate, and very debatable, but I imagine Brown's there. But I also don't think the Boston Celtics would answer a call if it does not start with Mikal Bridges getting traded to Boston. So, again, another one. Toronto, if Pascal Siakam, hypothetically, was traded for Jaylen Brown. Again, it's a good debate to have between Scottie Barnes and Jaylen Brown, but right now, you're probably choosing Jaylen Brown. And like I said with Paolo Banchero, that's a great conversation to have down the line a couple of years from now. Who's the number one guy on the team between him and Scottie Barnes, or Jaylen Brown or Scottie Barnes? The Houston Rockets, a team that wishes they have Jaylen Brown because I've seen several photoshops. I think the only way he wouldn't be the number one option on the Houston Rockets is if they would have got the number one pick, which, spoiler alert, they didn't. The Portland Trail Blazers. I think as long as Damian Lillard is there, he's probably going to be the number one option. Now, again, I don't know if Boston answered the phone call from the Trailblazers if it doesn't start with Damian Lillard. Now, again, there's a bit of a difference between them and the Brooklyn Nets because, like I said, I don't think the Nets or the Celtics are going to answer a call from the Nets. Where with the Celtics, they might be hesitant on Damian Lillard just because of his age and the size of the contract. And the Trailblazers have apparently been shopping the number 3 pick. So, that being said, though, I think as long as Damian Lillard's there, Brown probably wouldn't be the number one option. If Lillard isn't, I think he would be. And then last but not least, the Washington Wizards. Now, this hypothetical scenario, you're swapping Bradley Beal for Jaylen Brown. The Celtics might consider it due to Bradley Beal and Jayson Tatum's friendship that they have. But I think almost everybody would probably say they would rather keep Jaylen Brown because Bradley Beal has such a crazy contract. So, that's 10 teams. Or, that's 9 teams. The 10th team, and the team that, if Jaylen Brown was hypothetically traded, this is probably the team I'd like to see him on, the Atlanta Hawks. But I think as long as Trae Young is there, he's probably going to be the number one guy. And you definitely could trade DeJounte and John Collins for Jaylen Brown. But I also think you could trade Trae Young for Jaylen Brown, just mainly based off of how the season went. So, if you're looking and you're Jaylen Brown and you're thinking, can I be the number one option on these teams? I listed 10 of them. And still, some of them are a bit questionable. But moral of the story, I don't think that is going to matter in the end-all, be-all. Now, when I look at these contracts, Brown is the only expiring. So, Smart has 3 years left. Tatum has 3 years left. His third year's player option. Horford has 2 years left. Tom Lord, shout out, has 3 years left. Malcolm Brogdon and Derek White have 2 years left as well, with Danilo Gallinari and Grant Williams being their free agents. More of the story, I spent 20 plus minutes talking about the Boston Celtics. And what I fully imagine this team will do in the offseason is run this team back one last time at least. And if it doesn't work out, they have serious questions to think about. Mainly, how much are we going to have to pay Jaylen Brown to stay here? Because, like I said, as long as Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum are there, they're going to be a good playoff team that always will have a chance. Is it going to be a consistent chance? It's questionable, probably, leaning towards probably. But if I was to say, what should they do this offseason? I don't know. Because I think no matter what, it's going to be, this team is going to stay the same. Unless Jaylen Brown teases or hints that he's not going to sign back here and that he's more than willing to ready to leave. I don't know if you hear that big, loud ass siren. It scared the crap out of me. So I think it is signaling for me to end. So, more of the story. I spent 20 minutes talking about the Boston Celtics. 99% sure they're going to run this team back. The only way you would trade Jaylen Brown is if he hints that he's not going to come back there. But I doubt that happens. But that is something else that we will see down the road. So, this is the second video this week. I mentioned it several times. I plan on having a video a day out. Yesterday was how I'd book the Money in the Bank ladder matches. Today was about my Offseason Wishlist, Volume 6, the losing team of the Eastern Conference Finals, which obviously ended up being the Boston Celtics. Video tomorrow, how I would book AEW/New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door 2023. Thursday, Shooting the Breeze, the NBA Finals Preview Edition. And then Friday, a weekly ROH TV review. So, thank you for watching this video. Please like all these videos that I just mentioned, or like and watch all these videos that I just mentioned. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.